Hello and welcome to the Magical Learning Podcast. As you can see in the podcast description today, I have a wonderful guest, Louise Gilbert. So, Louise, let's start by finding out how's your week been? And welcome.
Do you know what? My week has been fabulous. I just turned 40, Danette.
Oh,
And
congrats! Happy
so
birthday!
thank you very much. So I had a really big party on the weekend, rodeo disco theme party. It was dress up and we put on a dance performance and it was
Oh,
wonderful.
oh,
Coupled with, the launch of my book. So yeah, lots of milestones and memories to create.
what an awesome week then. That's so good. All right. Well, let's talk about your book. And do you want to show our
Yeah,
viewers
sure.
to encourage people to view?
Sure thing.
Louise's book is Make Work Work for You. And so we're going to talk about this book. And I'd love to start, Louise, with your journey and why you actually wrote this book.
Yeah, it's a good question. Thank you. And it's been through lots of different iterations. When I left my corporate role, I was working at one of the big four banks around 7 years ago now. I was leading large scale change and transformation. I left that and I entered into the startup world where I really wanted to create some scalable technology to support. At the time, it was parents with their relationships because I had myself had this experience in my relationship going through this complex, change and transition process when you have a baby and start fighting with your husband and all those sorts of things. Anyway, I thought technology is a great way to help support parents through that change and transition. So I went into the startup world and did a lot of research and a lot of developing of prototypes, etc. And so I always had this desire to create something scalable to create a positive shift, I suppose, in the world. And, many years later, my business transformed. I moved out of, I guess, the startup world, tech-driven startup world. And my business now is more, I suppose you could say, offering more services, working with large organizations. And so really, I think it was that thread around still wanting to access people or reach people that weren't right in front of me, who weren't able to attend workshops or any of my leadership development programs and experiences, or who weren't in the audience when I'm giving keynotes. So I think a book is a great way to do that.
Love that. And I love books, so it's one of my favorite
as,
things.
as do I.
So, tell us about the three petals of excellence. So let's start there, and then I'll ask the second part of the question.
Yeah, thank you. So the three petals of excellence is my model that I came up with after working in change for so long, most of my career now, so over 15 years, really noticed that leaders, and when it comes to change as well, oftentimes will focus on growth or performance at the expense of well-being.
Mm-hmm.
Or sometimes we might have a big focus on well-being sometimes, but then we kind of think that, maybe that performance doesn't have to stay up at the same time. So my model was really informed by insights of working in change on the ground and working with leaders and going, well, really, we need all three petals, right? We need to combine growth, we need to combine performance, we need to combine well-being to make work work for people. And so, the way that I think about it is performance is about, getting the job done. It's about doing great things, reaching the outcomes, getting the results. Growth is all about getting better. It's not just about skills, it's about capacity as well, so capability and capacity. And it's also about well-being, which is about feeling good. That's where we're looking at mental health, we're looking at our broader health. And when I think about all those three petals combined, I think about how they apply to us at an individual level, how they apply to us as a team, and then also at an organizational level as well. And so in my mind, and I'm one that likes sort of structure and models and frameworks and that sort of thing, when I think about performance, growth, and well-being and how we can create change at the individual level, the team level, and the organizational level, I automatically see a 3x3 matrix.
I was going to say that's what I see too.
Yeah, I see a 3x3 matrix. And, in working closely with leaders and teams, and one of my strengths is pattern recognition as well, is that I've been able to see that there are practices, specific leadership practices that fit into those categories or that matrix, I suppose, the 3x3. And it's the leaders that are doing these things that are getting the balance right, I suppose, and creating that positive change that we need for the complex changes that we're, facing these days.
I love a 3 by 3. So
Yeah.
it's so exciting. So I'm really interested in, so each of those elements obviously help create excellence. So do you want to unpack a little bit of your 3 by 3 and maybe share one or two things that people could go, oh yeah, I could do that?
Yeah, sure thing. And there's quite a lot. So as I mentioned, there's 27 practices in the book. So to choose one is like playing favorites with a child. But
Oh, you can choose 2 or 3. I don't mind.
yeah. Look, if I think about one of the challenges that comes up, leaders time and time again talking about some of the challenges in hybrid ways of
Yes.
working.
Yep.
Yeah.
Nice.
Hybrid is a huge challenge. And when I think about that, it presents differently for everybody, but what's really needed, I think, is this growth in our leaders' capacity to think about and hold more complexity and to lead
Yes.
through that as well.
Nice.
So not jumping to policies, for example, which are technical solutions, but being able to hold and sit with complexity and step back and really question some of the assumptions, I suppose, that are being made that drive some of the decision making. I can bring that to life a little bit more, but
Yeah, that'd be great.
some of the practices that are in my book, include things like perspective taking.
Yep.
So,
Nice.
many years ago, and I write about this in my book. Do you remember, Danette, the dress that went viral? It was a dress. Some people might have seen it as gold
Oh, yes. Yeah, yeah.
or black and blue.
Yes.
Yeah. What did you see? Do you remember?
I think it was the black and blue.
Black and oh, interesting brain you've got. No, I'm kidding.
I do have an interesting brain.
No, as do I. And so, I think that was a really good example where, people were adamant, no, it's definitely black and blue versus the gold and white, there was kind of two main trains of thought, I think, but a really great example where people can hold different perspectives. And by being able to appreciate that both are valid and we can combine the two, we actually learn something new. Right. So in that experience, beyond just the colors of the dress, we were able to learn that people have different color perceptions, and there are different ways of interpreting and seeing things. And so I think that is a very, very important skill or capacity that leaders need, especially when it comes to hybrid ways of working, and especially when I think about, where the future is going as well. So when we think about hybrid ways of working, at the moment, the conversation has been centered on two variables. It's been place and time. So where is the work happening and when is the work happening, or how much of the work is happening? In the future, I think the third component is going to be what work is done. But
Tell me
it will
more.
be in a way that is different. I mean, we know about, I've listened to your podcast. So, I've heard Callum McCurdy, for example,
Yes.
fellow neurodivergent person as well. So, I think about how are we going to include and accommodate and create a world of work that is suited to neurodivergent needs, for example, 1 in 5, neurodivergent people. So, yeah,
I
what
love
work is
that.
done and how we align that work to play to people's strengths, which is incredibly important, not just for productivity, efficiency, performance growth, and well-being, but it's also to prevent burnout as well.
Yeah.
And it's very important that we do that at the individual levels, the team, and the broader sort of systemic organizational levels. So yeah, all of that, bit of a rant, but
No, that's a
all of
great
that comes
answer.
back to our leadership capacity.
Yeah.
And I think we've got a lot of work that needs to be done there, and for good reason. So we need
Yeah.
to, chop, chop, let's get going with that.
I love that answer, Louise. That was awesome.
Thank you.
So, I'm curious, what are most people missing when they're leading in the organization? So obviously we spoke about the perspectives, but what's maybe a blind spot that the leaders are sort of missing that when they sort of tweak that could really make a big difference?
Quite a few things. So once again, my 3 petals of excellence model,
Yep.
always holding that front and center. So how are we supporting people's performance? How are we helping them to get better in their growth? And how are we also supporting them to feel good? Now, that's not necessarily around training skills, because I think oftentimes that's a bit of a quick fix, or people jump to that sort of solution. But a leader's role is really around how to create those conditions. So how do we create the environment to enable those performance and those growth and those wellbeing outcomes to occur? And so that is a shift in looking at it from my perspective, based on the leaders that I've spoken with. I think there's some other missed opportunities as well. I coach executives, I coach senior leaders, I also coach teams as well. And that's great. And I love that. And we're able to reach some really great outcomes. But what about peer coaching in the workplace? You know, there's so many benefits of that. Instead of waiting for a leader to coach you, or, you know, really relying on peers. And that, in some ways, can be more effective because you have the same power levels, I suppose, the same sort of dynamic there. But also you've got that shared context and that shared understanding as well. So I think more of that needs to happen. And that doesn't have to be overly formal. It can be as simple as, you know, connecting across that silo that exists, across that boundary, and trying to you know, collapse that and asking for some advice, or getting another perspective on a challenge. And I think that can be a really powerful thing that's not done enough at the moment.
Yeah, I love that suggestion. That's a great idea.
And then I also, and speak about this in my book as well, I think leaders, you know, bless them. I'm not here to bag leaders. I love, you know, I love working with leaders, and they've got so much opportunity to create important change. I think there's so much focus on fixing. So much focus on fixing. And maybe that's an assumption, right? Maybe a leader's role is not to fix something solely.
Love that.
Yeah. And so I think, again, we need to question the assumptions that we're carrying. And, you know, oftentimes I've had so many leaders come to me, we've spoken about it in our coaching session, saying, you know, this person in my team keeps coming to me. They don't have ideas, they don't have solutions, or they just come to me with the problems. You know, they dump things on my desk and try to get me to solve it for them. And in cases where the leader does pick that problem up and solves it for them, it's just perpetuating that cycle, right?
Totally.
And so it's really about how can leaders understand or identify that those patterns are happening.
Yep.
You know, those behavioral patterns are happening, and how can we shift roles, moving out of the role of fixer, for example, maybe as a leader, to moving into another role, which might be one of question asker, to change the pattern. And it can be quite simple, really, when you know how to do that, rather than going through, you know, lots and lots of hard conversations and feedback cycles and, you know, doing their head in, because I hear this behind closed doors. Oh, they're doing my head in. You know, why can't they just come to me with some solutions? Why they keep asking the same, you know, the same thing, etc. So I think that's another missed opportunity for leaders to be able to spot those patterns that are emerging, and step out of the role that they're in, and move into another one. So it's sort of like a yin and yang, really, isn't it?
Yes.
If you're a fixer, there's something that needs to be fixed. It creates that dynamic. And so let's move into a different dynamic. And that's something that we all have the power to control as well.
Love that. So we talked earlier about hybrid work. What are some ways that organisations, individuals and teams, like I'm interested in all three of those around hybrid work.
What about hybrid work?
How do we actually, you know, make it better? So at an individual level, at a team level, and at a leader level, what are some simple things, or some maybe require a bit of investment? So maybe they're not so simple, but they're good ideas to put in place to make hybrid work better.
Yeah. Well, I think the first thing is there's a lot of organizations who, you know, are doing pilots, which is fantastic. They are experimenting. They're using data. They're capturing the data. They're holding a set of hypotheses, for example, that a 4-day work week would be more effective on all parameters in terms of performance, in terms of productivity, in terms of people's well-being, etc. And I think, you know, they are running the experiments as pilots in isolated sort of sections of the organization, which is wonderful. I think the caution here is that every organization is a different system and it has a different context. And so the worst thing that I would want to see is that one company picks up what another company is doing and just does a plug and play, because that's not necessarily going to work. Yeah. So I think it's really important to co-create it with
Yes.
the people that work there, yeah. But also keep in mind that there is a strategy as well, the business strategy. So it's about co-creating with people, having the purpose and the strategy at the heart of it as well, and designing some safe to fail experiments.
Yes.
Yeah,
I
really
love that.
important. Now, of course, when I talk about engagement and culture with organizations and getting feedback or, voice of employee or voice of customer into the mix, sometimes I hear, oh, but people don't tell me, or yeah, everything's fine. They don't tell me all of those sorts of things. So it can come back to psych safety as well, how comfortable people are feeling, and that can be a really good indication as well. So there's a few bits and bobs to it, I think.
Nice, nice. Love that. Has been your most interesting experience? So when we're talking about, making work work, what's the one where you go, oh, that was awesome? And then I'm also curious about one where you went, oh, no.
What's coming to my mind is not the great ones. It's another theme or a pattern.
Okay, let's talk
If
that
I
one
could share
first.
that.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, and I would have to say that it's a bit of it's a pattern that I see, which is don't want to bag leaders again, but it happens. So
No, I don't see it as bagging leaders. I think part of leadership is people don't tell you what's going on. And so being able to go, oh, that could be a blind spot of mine because someone's actually said it. I actually think that's really important.
listening to the noise
Mm-hmm.
that's going on and not
Yep.
the needs. I think that's a really big thing. And being able to, as a leader, decipher what's noise, what's
Yes.
going on, what's noise, what's sort of distracting me, or what's the loudest versus what's the real need that's going on here. Now, I see this time and time again in, when leaders contact me for the first time and we have an initial chat about working together, whether that be, a leadership development program or some workshops or what have you, working with the team and that sort of thing. And oftentimes what they're presenting to me is the noise,
Yes.
the team just wants to go out and have some drinks together, or the team's not feeling connected, or all of these things. I'm like, well, there's something else at play here, really. And so I think that's probably a message that I have for leaders, and that's okay. It's good to at least be aware of what the noise is, but we need to really develop, and we can work together on this, but we really need to develop that ability to work out what is just noisy versus what do we really need to focus on that's going to shift the dial and make a really big difference to how the team's functioning and performing, whilst also still growing and supporting wellbeing. And I'll give you an example of that that I saw a lot of, especially years ago during COVID. So, of course, we were talking about things like stress and burnout, and that's a huge problem, still is today.
Yes.
Now, when it comes to things like skills training around, say, regulation or stress management and that sort of thing, I'm not saying that that's not helpful. In fact, I often incorporate a lot of that into the work that I do. But when we think about burnout, the causes of that are not people not being able to manage stress. It's about how the work is designed. It's about how much work people have, and it's about other systems, the systemic factors that are at play as well. And so we really need to just be really clear, I suppose, on what is root cause, what is presenting as noise versus what can we really do that actually makes a difference and gets ROI and helps us achieve our outcomes. And I'd have to say that that's probably something I'm very, very passionate about. But also, it's probably I'm so passionate about it that I end up, turning down jobs sometimes because I'm not, I'm here to make an impact and to make a difference. And if we're not doing that, then it's just a waste of everyone's time, right? So
yeah, totally agree. When it's a bit of a tick the box.
Yeah, no.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
either. Yep.
Yeah. Or if it's a tick the box, let's know that it's a tick the box and it's a path to a way to do something that's going to create the impact that we need.
Yep.
It's just
Nice.
so much to do, I think.
Yes.
And so much that we can be doing that's really meaningful and important, that I don't think we can afford that sort of time to waste.
Yeah, I love that answer. So, what else would you like to share with our listeners and our viewers, Louise?
Oh, lots of different things, I suppose,
Awesome.
Danette. I mean, I've got my book. Yes,
Yes.
got my book. Now, as I mentioned, I'll show you the book. Mentioned with the book, and I suppose this is a bit of a plug, but on my website, I'm always going to have a free chapter download available. So if
Nice.
this is not something that's accessible to buy, then I don't want that to be a barrier. So for anybody, jump to the website. I'm sure we can give out the details later, and you can download a free chapter there. And the other piece I suppose I want to talk about is neurodivergent inclusion in our world of work. This is something with lived experience I'm very passionate about at the moment across the room here, because this is my home office. I have a daughter who is in autistic burnout, and the reason for that is the systemic factors of the education system, the medical system, don't support her. So, I think that's one of the reasons that drives my work around systemic change. Of course, it's one of the reasons, but I've been in change well and truly before I had her as well. So I think, what was your question? I'm going off track, but neurodiversity.
Oh, no, just what you wanted to share with the audience.
Oh, yeah, no, this is my brain in action.
Yeah, that's okay. That's good.
Lots pinging around at the moment. I think, a few months ago, I got contacted by an organisation. They had heard some great stuff, which is great, and they wanted to get me in to do I think it was a lunch and learn or a half-day workshop series or something around neurodivergent people in the workplace. And I ended up speaking to them about, what their broader plan was around transforming their workplace and what their goals were, etc. And they didn't have one. And they wanted to just have someone come in and just have a chat to start with. And I ended up declining that workshop, that session, because really there wasn't budget allocated. There weren't plans that they were sort of wanting to or able to develop alongside me. And so again, it begs that question around, so why do something if it's not going to make a longer term difference?
Yes.
And I think that there's so many things in our world of work today that are assumptions that are built on these neuronormative standards and practices that many organizations are going to lose incredibly talented people.
Yes.
Because it just doesn't work. It just doesn't work for them. And I already see rumblings, and I hear rumblings of this. I coach many ADHD, autistic senior leaders, and their organizations don't know about their neurotype. I think they're drawn to me because I have that lived experience, but it's one of those, quiet conversations that we're having. And so I think there's a big job on our hands to level up, and it's not about a D&I initiative. This is about redesigning the whole HR or employee life cycle, all of it. Now, that might seem daunting to some, but it's right through from, how we go about advertising roles and to hiring, and right through that process. And I guess the work that I do is really in leadership development and in change. And so it's just blows my mind that it wouldn't be standard practice already. And I'm an impatient person. I'm very, achievement oriented. And so I think it's 2024. Like, come on, let's get with it. So all programs, all leadership development experiences, all talent development, all of that, and the whole HR life cycle or employee life cycle really needs to be redesigned. So that's a bit of I don't want that to be overwhelming for people, but let's just lean into it, let's just lean into it. It's too important not to.
Yeah. Well, particularly, because your people are it. Like, it's great to have systems, but we still need people. So, I love that.
Sometimes I get shown some internal, programs, and I still see that, our leadership development programs or our management training fundamentals essentially haven't changed in the last 20, 30 years. They haven't changed, but we know so much more about people. We know about neurodiversity. We know about how it's so important when it comes to, motivation, to create the conditions around us to bring out our best. We know so much more now. And so I really believe that it's important that we introduce more contemporary methods into the leadership game, into the ways that we work and do things. And that all starts, or should start, or should have started now. Let's go.
I love it. So, Louise, I'm betting that there's going to be some listeners and viewers that would really love to reach out to you. So, where is the best places to find you?
Yeah, well, I'm everywhere in terms of the social channels. My email address or website's probably the best one. So if you head to louise-gilbert.com, that's probably your best bet. I've got lots of, as I said, you can download the free chapter from the book. You can, buy the book. That'll be on, Amazon, all those good things as well. And there's a contact form there. Otherwise, my direct email address is louise@louise-gilbert.com.
Nice. Oh, excellent. Well, Louise, this has been such an awesome conversation. Love, love, love talking about you, and totally agree about the neurodiverse perspective. Just even having the conversation with Callum McCurdy that you referred to blew my mind. So I have a finance background, and when he was explaining, drop-down menus and that, and I was like, oh my goodness, we don't do it well enough. So yeah, definitely. Would be good to have you back for another episode and talk a little bit more about that too. I'd love that if you're interested.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a huge, I wouldn't say it's a passion. I would say it's an identity, right? It's part of who I am. It's part of a lot of people, a lot of my clients' worlds as well. And maybe if we're going to do that, we should do it like neurodivergent style as well, Danette. Might have to have some fidgets up a little bit, and
we have pipe cleaners.
You can see my mind really wander and go a little bit.
I love it.
Orthogonal is how it's described.
We literally have pipe cleaners in our face-to-face thing so people can play and listen, and they love it. So, so thank you so much for joining us on the Magical Learning podcast, and to all of our listeners and viewers, thank you as well, and have a magical week.